There are moments in history when silence becomes sharper than a sword. When the meek, the overlooked, rise, not with violence, but with truth so powerful it tears through the walls of deceit. This story unfolded not on a battlefield, but within the gleaming glass walls of Verintech, a billion-dollar corporation built on greed and arrogance.
At its helm stood Richard Varon, a man worshipped for his charisma and feared for his cruelty. His voice could make executives tremble. His glare could end a career. He believed power meant never being questioned.
And then there was Ethan Cole, a quiet intern from a small town, earning minimum wage and endless humiliation. Ethan didn't wear expensive suits or speak in polished phrases. He listened, observed, and stayed invisible, or so Richard thought.
One morning meeting changed everything. In front of 200 employees, Richard slammed a report onto the table and barked, "Who prepared this disaster?" Ethan raised his hand. Richard smiled, the kind of smile that kills softly. "Ladies and gentlemen, behold our future leader," he mocked. Laughter filled the boardroom. Ethan lowered his eyes but said nothing, because in his laptop, hidden behind a single encrypted folder, he held something that could end Richard's empire. Proof of embezzlement, forged audits, and millions siphoned from the company's funds. The tyrant had laughed too early. The silence he mistook for weakness was the calm before his ruin.
2 weeks later, the board assembled for a quarterly meeting. The air was heavy, polished with money and fear. Richard stood before the screen, charming as ever, boasting of profits, until Ethan, standing quietly at the back, spoke. "Sir, may I present a different report?" The room froze. Richard's smile faltered. Ethan plugged in his laptop. On the screen flashed transaction trails, offshore accounts, fake vendor signatures, every secret Richard thought buried. "These were signed by you, sir." The room went silent. The CFO's jaw dropped. The legal head whispered, "This is fraud." Richard's face turned pale. His voice cracked. "Turn that off!" But Ethan didn't. The final slide read, "Truth does not need permission." For the first time in 10 years, the great Richard Varon had nothing to say. Only silence, deep, cold, and complete.
Security escorted Richard out of the boardroom that same afternoon. No press conference, no farewell speech, just whispers and lowered eyes. Ethan stood outside the glass doors, watching the man who once mocked him reduced to a shadow. He didn't smile, he didn't gloat. He simply breathed, steady and free.
The chairman of the board, an elderly man named Samuel Crane, approached. "Son," he said quietly, "do you realize what you've done?" Ethan nodded. "I just showed the truth." Crane looked at him for a long moment. "Truth," he said, "is the most dangerous weapon in the wrong hands, and the most sacred one in the right." In the following days, word spread across departments like fire. Employees whispered of the intern who exposed the tyrant. HR removed Richard's portraits from the lobby, his name from the top of every email signature. The company trembled, not from fear, but awakening. For years, people had obeyed Richard not out of respect, but out of terror. Ethan's act shattered that illusion. When reporters later asked Ethan why he did it, he said only this: "Respect should be earned, not demanded."
His words became the quiet anthem of those who endured abuse in silence. Moral: power built on fear is an illusion. It survives only until someone with courage decides that truth matters more than comfort. In a world where arrogance shouts, dignity whispers, and always wins in the end.
Months passed. Ethan was offered a full-time position, not in finance, but in ethics and compliance, the department rebuilt in his name. Yet he never accepted. He left Verintech quietly, returning to his small hometown. But the story of the intern who brought down the CEO traveled far beyond those glass towers. Business schools discussed it. Online forums called him the silent whistle. Some said he was a hero. Others called him reckless. Ethan didn't care for either title. He once wrote in his journal, "If truth destroys you, it means you were living a lie." Years later, a framed quote appeared in Verintech's main hallway. No name, no title. Just the words, "Truth does not need permission." Every new employee read it during orientation, unaware that the phrase came from a quiet intern who once stood up against a tyrant. And so, the legend endured, a reminder that in every empire of deceit, there waits one soul who dares to speak. In the grand history of power, his was not a story of victory, but of conscience. Because sometimes the bravest act isn't fighting, it's revealing.